Canadians are often described jokingly for their love of hockey and ability to survive the harsh winters of the Canadian North. But what does it really mean to be Canadian? Every year we come together to celebrate being Canadian, and on that day, July 1st, we celebrate the diversity of our nation, our home. From elementary school, we are taught of other cultures and globalization. We are taught that Canada is a mosaic of cultures, in contrast to the melting pot of the United States. Can we say then that Canadians are Canadian for their shared sense of having split identities? Most of us have come from foreign lands to Turtle Island, North America, and have come to find this place as a new home. Being Canadian often seems, to me, to be the sense of embracing two identities, two or more senses of attachment, one to the spaces we now inhabit in Canada, and the second to the real or imagined spaces of the lands of our ancestors.
Say hi.
Hi.
Like most Canadians, my siblings and I come from mixed cultural backgrounds. My brother and I are partly of First Nations descent, while our little sister is part Malawian. Despite looking different, we all share a common heritage of being English and Ukrainian. In 1904, our great-great-grandparents came over from Wales via Liverpool to begin a new life in Canada, settling and building a farm in Saskatchewan, and a farm which continues to run today. Our family, however, also has ties to Ukraine. We grew up watching our mother cook Ukrainian food for us, while our grandma and Baba, great-grandmother in anglicized Ukrainian, continue to maintain ties to family and friends in Poland, both speaking and reading Ukrainian, and passing down the ability to make good Ukrainian food.
What is this obsession with what are people? Or even if you find that you don't ask people, like, what are they? Or get that question yourself. It's, I would say, undeniable that every day when we're out interacting with the public, we make certain assumptions about people based on how they look. For example, if you look at my little sister, you would not expect the background, especially the cultural background that she has. So a lot of people would classify her as a little black girl, or, a black African American, or just, African American, or Afro-Canadian, or something like that. But that completely denies her, Ukrainian background. And it's kind of interesting that, what people will classify her as is something that is probably not as significant to her. So, of course, I'm speaking for her, and she's gonna grow up and have to deal with these problems and issues herself. But I feel like from the cultural standpoint, she's gonna be much more, have much more attachment to her Ukrainian side, because that is the side that she's growing up with and that she has sort of access to. But when people look at her, they won't say, "Oh, she's Ukrainian." Well, it's not like anyone ever says that. They just say, that's a white person. And that's problematic as well, because, race is not culture and culture is not race. There are, I guess, biological factors that a majority of maybe a culture has, but it doesn't mean that they're the same. So UBC, there is the Longhouse, and that is a very odd site for me. A site as in place. Because on one hand, it is one of my favorite places on campus, sitting underneath the place where you can do smudge ceremonies. So it's a really comforting space, and I've gone there, when I'm really upset sometimes, just because it's just amazing to sit there. But at the same time, I have this irrational fear that someone's going to say, you can't be here because you're not Indian enough. And I know that it's so irrational, but the fear is there. And it's a lot based on how I look. And because I can't, prove my Indianness with my looks, I can't really do anything else to back up my claim that I am First Nations, and it makes me uncomfortable. And like last year, I took a course and we were talking about folklore, and we were talking about like how folk traditions pass down, and it was something that like highlighted one of my fears is that my cultural knowledge is not actual cultural knowledge. Or not that it's not actual cultural knowledge, but it's not valid in the sense of tradition. It's something that was learned from books and my own searching and through other people rather than my family. Didn't you learn from a group?
The Indian Club. That's when we had the Indian lady come in there and teach us about the culture and shit. So my brother was Cree, so I learned some Cree words and shit. We made dream catchers there, explored the different the spirits and shit. We went through stories. I can still make dream catchers and shit. I can still make moccasins and medicine bags. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. Well, what do you think about that?
I like doing it. That's why I still know how to do it. Still made dream catchers since then.
For my brother and I, connecting with our First Nations background is important, especially because of how we are so close to our grandmother. Unfortunately, the legacy of the residential schools has made it very difficult to make ties with our cultural heritage, as even our grandmother has been cut off from her culture.
What do you know about the residential schools?
So grandma's in one. I know they were bad. It was a no place. Trying to assimilate the native population into the white population because they were seen as inferior and they wanted us to talk like them, act like them. What they ended up doing is destroying the heritage and the bloodlines and then making parents have years of misabuse, which goes on to their parents and then goes on to us. If that is what you're referring to with your question.
You've got lots of Indian friends, right?
Oh, fucking answer, dude.
Is there a sense of, with that guy that you met, who is also, is he also Ojibwe?
No, he was Inuit.
Oh, Inuit, okay. Like, did you guys feel a sense of camaraderie as soon as you found out you're both?
Well, that's what I knew. If I went up to him and called him white guy, he wouldn't kick my ass as soon as he found out I was half native. I was safe in that regard.
So it'd be really offensive if some guy came up to you and called you a white guy or something?
If he was white? Fuck yeah, it would be. I was so pissed off. Unless I knew him. In which case I just have to hit him a little bit.
Every single time I come back here, you guys start in on me being white and stuff.
Pale Indian. I'm sorry, I love that. It's awesome. It's funny.
Why?
So you are the pale Indian.
Is it a bad thing to be a pale Indian?
Depends.
So right now, I am applying for my status. Once I get my status, or if I get my status, knock on wood, then I will be able to say, here's a piece of paper that says that I'm Indian enough, that validates my Indianness. And this is really problematic because essentially what I'm using to validate my Indian identity or to fully validate my Indian identity to the community is through the state's piece of paper, basically. Even though people say, they're like, oh, are you sure it's really that, like, that your grandma's full Indian or something like that? Well, she's not even full Indian. I mean, what does that even mean? Because, so many bloodlines are mixed up, but there's this idea that you can trace sort of, I guess, purity through this, as you can see through applying for status. There's a lot of issues surrounding this, and part of, I guess, my issues are also tied with, my grandma's issues and her own um, interactions, I guess, with the state. Like, she hasn't actually, like, she did have her status revoked and given back, and based on how the state sort of saw her. And I'm talking about the state as, like, an abstract figure, but I mean, whoever's been in charge of, was it now, Aboriginal and Indian affairs, and Aboriginal and Northern affairs. So my grandma went to residential school, which I believe, would have been in the 40s. And she was there for about 2 years. And then her dad somehow sold her status. But anyway, so that happened when my grandma was younger. And then what happened to Indian women before 1985 was that if an Indian woman married a white man, she lost her status. And so I'm not exactly sure what happened with my grandma and her status, as apparently she sort of seemed to have it lost beforehand. But she did manage to get her status back again in 1985. And that was the year that a bill was passed that recognized, sexist ways of policy and gave the women their status back. And it was only in 2011, 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, in this coming January, that the sexist policy was again changed to be much more gender equal. So she's had different, time periods of her life where the state validated her Indianness and where it took it away. And it also taught her that it wasn't a good thing as well. So there's a lot of interesting interactions in that sense of not only, internal conflicts of understanding who you are, at least culturally, but there's also this sense of outside forces imposing identities on you, taking them away, whether it be, by society or a state group or something like that. So with those ideas in mind, I feel it's really important that we sort of understand who we are. We try to figure out who we are. For me, I am too conflicted in my cultural background to really say what I am or to fully commit to one cultural heritage and whatnot, because I will always be in this weird limbo zone of I'm not fully non-Indian or Ukrainian, but I'm also not fully Indian or Ukrainian. So it always sort of depends on how I feel and how others feel. So it's like this push and pull back and forth. But I want to have culture, like the idea of traditional cultures, but I can't quite rectify my own cultural identity. So I kind of ditch my own heritage. I don't ditch it, but I don't participate in it as much. But I love learning about other cultures and traditions and ideas and food and whatnot, because when I go into these other culture groups, I know where I stand. I know that I'll never be, Indian, like in the South Asian sense, or Chinese or something like that. I always know where I stand. And so I don't have any anxiety about it. And it's kind of comforting and liberating, as well as, I make a community with friends.
Given the mixed identities and cultural backgrounds we all come from, how do we ground ourselves in the present realities of Canada while also having imagined homelands or ideas of other places and people?